moment is the mother lode of bad ideas.
Jesus.
So we have
That's
ideas
just a fact.
like blasphemy.
It's an ugly
apostasy.
It's
basic liberal. Well, let me unpack it.
S'il vous plaît, au nom de nos principes laïques, de bien vouloir demander à l'accompagnatrice qui vient de rentrer dans cette salle, de bien vouloir retirer son voile islamique.
Une raison, une seule, pour garder sur notre territoire des étrangers qui collaborent avec une idéologie totalitaire qui veut la mort.
Saddam's regime, I guarantee you that it will have enormous positive reverberations on the region. And I think that people sitting right next door in Iran, young people, and many others will say, the time of such regimes, of such despots, is gone. There is a new age. I had written a book in which I had said that the way to deal with terrorist regimes, well, with terror, was to deal with the terrorist regimes. And the way to deal with the terrorist regimes, among other things, was to apply military force against them.
The way we did it. To be in place. Israel is now bombing Gaza this morning. Yeah, it comes less than 24 hours after President Biden and other world leaders celebrated, saying Israel and Hamas were in agreement. Incoming President Trump had also claimed credit for the apparent deal. Israeli officials claim they never agreed to the ceasefire. Israeli airstrikes continue into Gaza, killing dozens of people.
The post-September 11, 2001 war on terror may have caused at least 4.5 million deaths in around half a dozen countries, according to a report published Monday. Brown University's Watson Institute for International and Public Affairs is studying the costs, casualties, and consequences of the war.
Apologize for the million Iraqis that are dead because you lied. You lied about weapons of mass destruction. You lied about connections to 9/11. You lied about Iraq being a threat. You sent me to Iraq. You sent me to Iraq in 2003. My friends are dead. Joshua Castile. You killed people. You lied. You lied about WMD. A million Iraqis are dead because you lied. My friends are dead because you lied. You need to apologize.
The application of power is the most important thing in winning the war on terrorism. If I had to say, what are the three principles of winning the war on terror? It's like, what are the three principles of real estate, the three L's, location, location, location? The three principles of winning the war on terror are the three W's, winning, winning, and winning. The more victories you amass, the easier the next victory becomes. The first victory in Afghanistan makes the second victory in Iraq that much easier.
Hey guys, so I, like many, have felt hopeless and useless in the situation that's happening in Gaza. And I sat with myself and thought of what can I do with the cards that I've been dealt to help influence at least one person into seeing the Palestinians as human. And the best thing that I could come up with is to do the research and understand how we got here, how we got to the point as a human race looking at another group of human beings and shrugging and saying it's just politics. How did we get here? I don't claim to be an expert, a scholar, or a great researcher, but I did take some time to do some research into how we may have gotten here through my perspective and obviously my bias. But it's a good thing to look through other lenses and understand how others might view the situation, different to your own. So I wrote something and I want to share that with you. I've tried to make it as cohesive as possible, but I guess you guys will be the judge of that. So yeah, what does it mean to be human? Well, at its core, it means to be seen, heard, and treated with dignity, respect, and empathy. But for centuries, Muslims around the world have faced a systematic effort to erase that humanity, not by any accident, but through deliberate colonial narratives, literary hypocrisy, war, and media bias to reduce a rich and complex identity of a group of people down to simplistic threats or stereotypes, where Muslims can be seen as a caricature, a threat, or an enemy more than anything else. This isn't just about Islamophobia. This is about dehumanization, a powerful tool used to justify inequality, violence, and control. So today we will explore how this has unfolded throughout history and across the continents, and how those patterns influence how Muslims are perceived and are treated in today's media and politics. Defining dehumanization. Now you might be wondering, what is dehumanization? I know that it's a term thrown around on the internet today, and because of this, it's led to its semantic satiation and eventually a lapse of meaning. Dehumanization is the psychological process of depriving someone of human qualities, personality, or dignity. For example, to subject someone to inhumane or degrading conditions or treatment, or to address or portray someone in a way that obscures or demeans that person's humanity or individuality. This can lead to the demonizing or objectifying of others, making them seem less than human. It allows people to commit or tolerate injustices without guilt. According to Haslam, dehumanization involves denying others the traits that define humanity: emotion, individuality, and moral concern. He and others argue that denying uniquely human attributes to others represents them as animal-like. Denying human nature to others represents them as objects. An expanded sense of dehumanization emerges where dehumanization becomes an everyday social phenomenon, rooted in ordinary social cognitive processes, which allows for the justification of violence. In politics, it becomes a scapegoat. In the media, it feeds on stereotypes. For Muslims, this is a reality that has happened across centuries, systems, stories, and continues to happen today. Colonialism and the Orientalist gaze. During the European colonialist project, Muslims became objects of both fascination and contempt. Orientalism, a term coined by Edward Said, described how Western empires depicted the East as irrational, barbaric, and hypersexual. These portrayals were not just inaccurate, they were dehumanizing. André Gide, a Nobel laureate, openly documented his sexual exploitation, that of which, allegedly, was mostly young Muslim Algerian boys. Instead of being condemned, he was celebrated as France's literary elite. Men like Paul-Michel Foucault and others continue to be praised for their achievements and never condemned for their alleged abuse of Muslim boys in places like Tunisia. One particularly revealing example comes from Hubertine Uclat, a so-called feminist pioneer in France. Rather than advocating for universal liberation, Uclat weaponized feminism to advance a colonial agenda. As noted by Clancy Smith, Uclat used feminist arguments to support French colonialism, portraying Arab men as oppressors and Muslim women as needing rescue. Her rhetoric reduced Muslim men to primitive villains and depicted Muslim women as passive victims in need of rescue by French civilization. In doing so, she contributed, ironically, to the imperial justification for occupation, under the guise of saving women. This trope of the rescued Muslim woman became a powerful tool for both colonial and later neo-colonial interventionism. It dismissed the agency of Muslim women while vilifying the men in their lives as uniformly oppressive. It also ignored the fact that Western women were not politically or socially liberated at that time, in ways much worse than Muslim women, thus exposing the double standard and hypocrisy of the so-called feminist saviorism. The New Yorker reports, visual colonialism functioned as a psychological and sexual conquest, where French photographers went to the colonies with a vision of Muslim women lounging in harems, smoking hookahs, trapped in the prison of their own homes, topless, sexually available. But when they reached the country, they encountered women whose bodies could not be seen, veiled from head to toe, with only their eyes visible. Algerian women were inaccessible to the photographer's gaze, but the photographers were not deterred. Looking at the colonial harem, Malik Alula exposes how French colonial postcards staged images, often featuring costumed women in harem-like interiors, wearing a head covering, but at the same time are topless, and posed in such a manner to portray them as exotic or sexually available. These images were not candid. The photographers constructed them using models who were often orphans and props and labeled them as ethnogenic glimpses, one of which was titled Moorish Women at Home. This all lended to a false sense of authenticity. And according to Alula, these portrayals were fantasies rather than reality, expressions of Western male desire and colonial domination, not documentation of Algerian life. By objectifying Algerian women and rendering Muslim men invisible or powerless, these images serve to emasculate social societies and reinforce narratives of control and moral superiority. This double-sided portrayal, Muslim women as sexualized victims and Muslim men as hypersexual aggressors, fed into the larger Orientalist narrative that the Muslim world was backward, dangerous, and in need of Western discipline. Meanwhile, men like Michael Foucault and Jean-Paul Sartre signed petitions calling for the decriminalization of relations with minors. These men, well, abusers actually, were revered in Western academia, while Muslim men accused of similar crimes are portrayed and inherently seen as violent, terrorist-adjacent, and representatives of the entire Muslim population. This is not equality before judgment. It is racialized morality. These contradictions illustrate a deeply ingrained racial and moral double standard. The West sees itself as the beacon of virtue and liberation, even when it acts through violence, perversion, and control, while Muslims, especially men, are painted as inherently dangerous or morally inferior. Modern wars and mass killings. Since 2001, US-led wars in Muslim-majority countries have caused an estimated 4,500,000 to 4,700,000 deaths, according to the Cost of War Project at Brown University. This includes both direct and indirect casualties from Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Pakistan, and Yemen. While these numbers are massive, they're often brushed aside. Civilian deaths from drone strikes, bombings of hospitals, schools, weddings, and funerals are routinely labeled as collateral damage, while similar tragedies in the West receive immediate media saturation and public mourning. The double standard says a lot about whose pain is allowed to matter. Part of how these wars were justified was by framing them as rescue missions, especially for Muslim women. Politicians, academics, and media figures leaned into the narrative that Muslim women needed saving from their own men. But anthropologist Leila Abu-Lughod called this out for what it is: a colonial mindset dressed up as feminist language. In her 2002 essay, she asks why we assume Muslim women need saving, and what that actually says about us. In doing so, she shows that this kind of rescue feminism centers around Western saviors while ignoring the voices and choices of the women it claims to protect or help. At the same time, Muslim men are framed as dangerous, backwards, and abusive. Their emotional pain, grief, or even love is rarely portrayed, only their supposed violence. Many argue that this is part of a broader system of gender dehumanization. Muslim women are objectified while Muslim men are vilified. The gendered Islamophobia theory holds that state and societal tropes ascribed to Muslim women are oppositional to those assigned to Muslim men. It elucidates how prevailing ideas of submissiveness and subordination attached to Muslim womanhood and the grand aim of liberating the Muslim women that follows are rooted in the imperial epistemology that caricatures Muslim men as violent, oppressive, and tyrannical. This discourse of masculine Islamophobia drives the war on terror rhetoric and policies and shapes how scholars imagine and examine subjects of Islamophobia. Altogether, this framing makes it easier to justify wars and occupation, because you're not attacking real people. You are liberating and defending against caricatures. The media plays a huge role in keeping this system alive today. In the UK, a study of mainstream newspapers found that 85% of stories about Muslims represented them as a threat. Attacks by Muslim perpetrators received 357% more coverage than those by non-Muslims, even though far-right or white nationalist attacks happen much more often. According to the Muslim Council of British Centre for Media Monitoring, when Muslims are mentioned in the news, they are 9 times more likely to be linked with terrorism than far-right extremists. And Hollywood isn't innocent either. From Jack Shaheen's study of Real Bad Arabs, we know that Muslim men are often shown as terrorists, tyrants, or religious fanatics, and Muslim women are either silent, veiled, or overly sexualized. It's a tired formula, but it's effective, because it shapes how people see us without really needing to say it. All of this creates a disturbing indifference to Muslim suffering. When Muslim civilians are killed, especially in places like Gaza, Yemen, or Syria, it barely makes the news. There's often no name, no backstory, no humanity in these cases. But if a terrorist claims to be Muslim, the world stops. It's not just about Islamophobia. It's about which lives are allowed to matter in public and which are disposable. After the Hamas attacks on October 7, 2023, anti-Muslim hate online exploded. Posts with slurs and dehumanizing language increased 422% on X, and YouTube comments calling Muslims animals or terrorists also increased. Advocacy groups like ISD and Tell Mama tracked this surge and found that it wasn't just online rhetoric. It was spilling into real-life hate crimes, threats, or harassment. The offline dangers of anti-Muslim hate can be seen in the killing of the 6-year-old Palestinian boy Wadia al-Fayoum on October 14, 2023. People using platforms to openly dehumanize Muslims with little pushback from moderators or governments made it clear that online spaces don't just reflect bias, but they amplify it. Now, when you take a step back, you see the pattern. When Western nations commit violence, whether it's through war, sanctions, sexual abuse, state-sponsored oppression, it's painted as complex, tragic, or accidental. The individuals involved are often humanized or even mourned. But when Muslims resist, grieve, or simply live, the same empathy is not extended. We're not tragic or dangerous. We're not victims or suspects. This mindset is what allows entire populations to be bombed, starved, and erased while the world watches in silence. From Lebanon to Iraq, Afghanistan to Syria, and now Gaza. We've seen the same cycle. Dehumanize, attack. Justify, ignore. Human rights experts have warned that the silence over Gaza is bordering on complicity and genocide. But to many, it doesn't register. Because if you've already internalized that Muslim lives are worth less, then what's happening doesn't feel like a genocide. It feels like politics. This is not just about Islamophobia. It's about an empire. It's about domination dressed up as freedom. It's about who gets to be human, who gets to be complex, and who gets to be forgotten. And if we don't call it out for what it is, we are similarly complicit. This is not a war on terror. It is an imperial campaign disguised as liberation. A mission of an empire built on the broken backs of the same people they call barbaric. To humanize is to resist. This is a history that must be recognized and understood. For every child bombed, for every woman abused, and for every man misjudged, dehumanized, and vilified. Dehumanization is not just an act of war, it's an act of forgetting. And this is a refusal to forget. It's more than just remembrance. It's about liberation, on our terms. The liberation of Muslims, socially, politically, spiritually, cannot be handed down by the empires that have built themselves on our pain. Liberation must be reclaimed through the assertion of humanity, truth, and memory. When the media normalizes our suffering, we must produce narratives that restore our depth. When governments justify our deaths in the name of progress, we must demand justice with clarity. When our children are dehumanized before they can even speak, we must teach them to see themselves as sacred and beautiful. To the world, it may sound like resistance, but to us, it is survival. It is a remembrance of a dignity that no drone, no headline, and no academic erasure can censor. We are not invisible. We're not voiceless. We're not less. And it's about time the world sees it for what it is.
Okay, can you defend it? Can you honestly, hand on heart, defend what is happening on a daily basis with all these Palestinians being slaughtered at food sites?
I believe it's a genocide. I cannot express the pain that I, along with many millions of people there, suffered on a daily basis watching those horrible images of children being murdered and starving to death, being absolutely blocked the aid of medicines, water, medical material, kids that have been amputated with anesthesia, people that yesterday were shot, 25 people were shot while they were looking for humanitarian aid in what they call the Hunger Games.
The fact that they shoot at people as they're waiting in line for humanitarian aid. Dozens of people get shot and killed literally every single day, as they're waiting for food. No, I'm not gonna let you filibuster, bitch. I'm not gonna let you filibuster. I'm not gonna let you filibuster. You guys are totally okay with IDF soldiers shooting and killing desperate people waiting for humanitarian aid. You're okay with that. I find it so unbelievably evil. Unbelievably evil. It shocks my conscience and my soul that people as evil as this exist in this world.